Good morning from beautiful Fiji. My name is Sabrina Khan-Sharma and I'm a human rights lawyer based in Nadi, Fiji. Today's episode of the International Law Tube looks at Nepal. Now, for those of you who do know about Nepal, it is an uphill battle as far as human rights law is concerned. Today specifically though, we will be focusing on transitional justice and human rights in Nepal, as well as looking at the rights of women and girls in Nepal. So let's begin. Nepal is a landlocked country that lies across the southern slopes of the Himalayan mountain range. It has an estimated population of 29 million. From 1996 to 2006, the Nepalese endured an extended civil conflict between the Communist Party of Nepal and the Nepalese government. Following the signing of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement in 2006, Nepal embarked upon a period of transition. Nepal's constitution, enacted in 2015, establishes a federal system of government with a prime minister, a parliament, and 7 provinces. Nepal's 2015 constitution establishes 8 human rights agencies or national human rights institutions, each with its own mandate to protect the needs of specific groups. These include women, Indigenous people, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable or marginalized groups. Now, these national human rights institutions have been tasked with monitoring human rights violations, assessing Nepal's compliance with international treaty obligations, and recommending changes to law, policy, and practice that may currently discriminate against groups within Nepal. One of these agencies is the National Human Rights Commission, which was established in the year 2000. Its current strategic plan, which goes from 2015 to 2020, has given priority to the issues of civil and political rights, such as transitional justice, social inclusion, consumers' rights, non-discrimination, and the human rights of disadvantaged classes and marginalized communities. It coordinates and cooperates with NGOs on these issues. Looking at the time of inception, the National Human Rights Commission has, it's achieved and retained an A status in its accreditation with the International Coordination Committee of the Network of International Human Rights Institutions. Now, this is despite reports from the Commission that it is significantly under-resourced. While the establishment of these agencies is a clear step forward, concerns have been raised that Nepal's human rights agencies appear to operate without a clear collaborative framework for cooperation or allocation of responsibility for matters that may fall within the remit of more than one agency. Now, it has been suggested over time that this lack of coordination may undermine their credibility, creating confusion among those they are meant to protect, weakening the rule of law and nurturing impunity. Nepal has made efforts to address transitional justice issues arising from the civil conflict. In 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Commission of Investigation on Enforced Disappeared Persons were established to investigate allegations of gross violations of human rights and crimes against humanity during the armed conflict, and to create an environment of reconciliation. But by the early 2018, the two commissions had respectively collected more than 60,000 and 3,000 complaints of human rights violations during the conflict. These complaints included allegations of murder, torture, and enforced disappearance. Despite the establishment of these two commissions, international organizations such as Amnesty International, the International Commission of Jurists, and Human Rights Watch have expressed concern that Nepal has made little progress on accountability for human rights abuses committed during the civil war. Now, we can look at the US Department of State. I think it was 2018, in its report on human rights practices, that they mentioned no cases have been brought for acts of torture or enforced disappearances during the civil conflict. There are outstanding disputes regarding land possession by the Maoists, for example, and their affiliate organizations. Some barriers to progress are seen to arise from the way in the commissions have been established. The enabling legislation makes provision for amnesties and impunity for human rights violations that would amount to serious crimes under international law, as well as a broad authority to facilitate reconciliation, even without the informed consent of victims and their families. Despite a decision of the Nepali Supreme Court criticizing those provisions, the law has not been amended to fully address those concerns. And the case to refer to there is Madhav Kumar Basnet and the Government of Nepal. The manner of operation of the commissions has also been criticized. In addition to concerns about resourcing, the international community has expressed reservations about the lack of transparency in the operation of the commissions and the lack of measures to ensure confidentiality or security. There are further concerns that perpetrators of human rights abuses remain in positions of power and that any investigations may be affected by the fact that the Communist Party of Nepal is a vested party in the conflict, has formed a coalition with the current ruling party. The operational mandate of both commissions was due to expire on the 9th of February last year, which is 2019. The government extended the terms of the two commissions by 1 year, although the terms of the commissioners expired on the 13th of April 2019. In April 2019, a number of UN special reports and working groups, they sent a joint communication to the Nepali foreign minister setting out information they had received regarding a lack of impartiality, independence, and transparency in the operation of the commissions, as well as the reported lack of progress and the need for possible amendment to the enabling legislation. Now, the memorandum called on the government to amend the enabling legislation to align with international human rights standards and sought the government's comments on the information set out in the memorandum. As at August 2019, no formal appointments to the commissioner positions had been announced. In addition to establishing the commissions, Nepal has sought to address transitional justice in other ways. For the first time, Nepal's 2018 Criminal Code recognizes enforced disappearance as a distinct crime. The provisions apply retrospectively to the cases that arose during the Civil War. However, the international community has raised concerns that the law doesn't actually meet Nepal's obligations under international law. This includes concerns that the definition of enforced disappearance falls short of international standards. The crime of enforced disappearance is not absolutely prohibited. Provisions related to superior and command responsibility are inadequate, and the penalties for enforced disappearance are inconsistent with international standards. Reports also indicate that despite recent human rights achievements in Nepal, several aspects of life continue to impact negatively on women and girls. Areas of concern relate to violence against women, child marriage, and other traditional practices such as dowries and chaupadi, which is the practice by which Nepalese girls and women are expected to sleep in menstruation huts. While some of these activities, such as chaupadi practices, have been outlawed, recent research suggests the laws have had very little impact on the actual practices. Because it is a part of what they've been practicing in tradition. Some other areas, such as equal citizenship for women, are not yet enshrined in domestic law either. And I think they really need to start discussing that, leaving it out in the open, and opening up for men and women both to contribute to legal changes in terms of regulation and progressive development there. Look, from a review of domestic and international commentary regarding Nepal, it is clear that considerable efforts are being made to move towards international human rights standards. However, commentary and analysis from both within and outside Nepal seems to highlight areas for further development. It is encouraging that Nepal is continuing to work with international organizations and consider recommendations to further progress its recognition and protection of human rights, which is at both institutional and individual levels.